40 Vision Podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by my good friend and fellow host, Salman Huck. What's up, man? How's it going?
Yo, what's going on, man?
Not much. So, today's topic is the worst free agents signed by AFC teams in the last 5 years. A couple weeks ago, we did the worst NFC free agents, so we're going to do the same thing with the AFC. So, just a reminder, this counts for guys that were signed off the street, so they were true free agents, or guys that were given big-time extensions by their teams before or directly after becoming free agents. So originally we were going to do 5 years, but we decided to extend it a bit just to spice things up. And just like last time, we'll start with the East. So we'll start with the AFC East and the Buffalo Bills. So Salman, who you got for the Buffalo Bills?
I went with Vontae Davis. He signed in 2018. He signs a 1-year, $5 million deal, and then I think like the first game of the season, he retires like mid-game and is like, "I'm done with this." So that's the reason why I picked him, because he just retired in the middle of a game. It's like not a huge free money deal, but it's just like you sign a guy who retires like the first or second game of the season, like in the middle of the game. That that's just odd, and that's just weird. And he was just a bad.
It's kind of hard to top that. Yeah, I don't think that I've ever heard of that before. I don't know if I've ever heard of a guy retiring in the middle of a game. I've heard of guys talking about something happening in the middle of a game where they're like, "Oh, you know what? I think I'm done. I don't think I can keep playing at a high level anymore." But yeah, that's got to be a first. And he's kind of a weird dude. Have you ever heard him talk? You ever seen an interview with him?
Yeah, one time maybe. It's been a while. He has an interesting way of talking, right?
Yeah, you know he's Vernon Davis's brother, right?
Yeah, I know that.
Okay. Just making sure. So I went with another guy from the 2018 free agent class, and that is Star Lotulelei. So this guy was originally a draft pick of the Carolina Panthers, I believe, a really high draft pick. He signs a 5-year, $50 million deal with the Bills, but it doesn't pan out. And a lot of it had to do with COVID. So he decided to opt out in the 2020 season. I don't know if he didn't want to get the vaccine, whatever it was. He chose not to do it. And basically, he tested positive in 2021. So, basically his career got derailed completely by the COVID-19 pandemic. He ends up playing 3 years out of that 5-year deal. He finishes his career with 5 sacks, 53 tackles, and that's about it. So just a lot of money to pay for a guy that doesn't end up doing much, but it's not really his fault, I guess. And I'm wondering, does Von Miller make this list if we wait a year? Because I think he's still on the Bills, but do you think he's a contender here?
Yeah, I think he could be. He could be a contender. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been pretty disappointing.
He definitely could be on there. Yeah, he's been pretty disappointing. He could. I think he might make this list if we roll it back in a couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Next up, the Miami Dolphins. Who you got here?
Miami Dolphins. I went with Byron Jones. So he signs in 2020. He has a 5-year, $82 million deal, making him the highest paid cornerback in the league at that time. In 2020, he has a pretty solid season. I mean, he has 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, 4 passes defended, and 37 tackles in 14 games. Then in 2021, he kind of falls off a little bit, 58 tackles, 10 passes defended, no interceptions, no forced fumbles. And then after that, in 2022, he gets on the PUP list, misses like the entire season after getting surgery for an Achilles injury. And then he gets released in 2023. And he hasn't played a game since that 2021 season. So he signs this big money deal, doesn't really live up to it per se, and then hasn't played it down since 2021.
I remember he was great on the Cowboys. He was a ball hawk.
He was great.
And I remember being upset that the Raiders did not sign him during this offseason, but I guess it worked out.
It definitely worked out in their favor.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The guy I went with is Will Fuller. So he's a really interesting NFL player in general. I feel like he's the guy that was, when healthy, was a potential like dominant deep threat, but he was just never healthy. So he has a great 2020 season with the Texans. He signs a 1-year, $10 million deal. So not a ton of money with the Dolphins, but he misses 6 games for PEDs. And then was inactive for another game for personal reasons, and he was just in and out. And then he had another injury and blah blah blah. And basically, for $10 million, he finished with 26 yards and 4 catches. So not a great return on investment. Also, not a huge long term deal, but he's one of those guys that just had so much promise, and I think he had a great connection with Deshaun Watson, and just I don't know, he just couldn't stay healthy. Just one of those guys that was kind of brittle, uh, and was usually a pretty high fantasy pick too, but just never panned out.
Always. People are like, "Oh, Will Fuller, he's gonna come back this year stronger and better than ever," and it never happened.
Nope. Next up, the Jets. I think there's a lot of potential choices here, but who
They
you
had a
got for the
lot. They
Jets?
had a lot of options. I went with Tremaine Johnson. He signs a 5-year, $72.5 million deal with the Jets. He gets like about half of that guaranteed. And I think he signs in 2018. So, and he has a pretty decent 2019 season where he plays 10 games, has 40 tackles, 5 passes defended, 4 interceptions. The next year he gets hurt, plays only 7 games, only starting 5 due to ankle injury. He eventually gets released by the Jets in 2020 as and he like loses his starting job to like Buster Skrine and things like that. So I don't know. It's like within a year and a half, this guy goes on a very steep decline, and the Jets just cut him. And I don't think he's
Was
ever
it
played for
injury
an NFL
related? Do you
team after.
remember, or did he just?
Some
I mean,
of
you
it
said
was
he only played
injury
7 games,
related.
but
He only played 7 games and he only started 5. But I think they were just like when he came back from that injury, he wasn't quite the same guy, or maybe that's what it was. But I don't know, for whatever reason, the Jets never gave him a chance to like fully come back from it, I guess. And they just like 2020, like, yeah, you're out of here, dude. Like,
mm-hmm.
I think there were already signs that he was not playing well, because I think even before he gets hurt, he gets benched for Buster Skrines before he even gets hurt. So,
Yeah.
and then he gets hurt playing in a game.
Cool. Yeah. So as I said, there was a few options I could have picked. Maybe any of the receivers they signed for Aaron Rodgers. Um, I'm blanking on one of the names. I remember Randall Cobb. I can't remember the other guy. Uh,
Alan Lazard,
Alan Lazard.
Corey
Maybe
Davis.
he was. I think. Oh yeah, that's right. He retired during training
He
camp.
retired, but then he's coming
Um,
back or something. I don't know. It's weird.
yeah, I remembered him on Hard Knocks. He just decided to retire. He was
Yeah.
always decent in Tennessee. But the big one is the highest profile one, and that's Le'Veon Bell. He signs a 4-year, $52.5 million deal with the Jets after sitting out for the entire 2018 season, which is completely unprecedented. He was in a contract dispute with the Steelers. He just never lives up to what he was. And the thing is, he was it's insane how good he was in Pittsburgh. Like, you go back and look at his stats, like he's putting up Christian McCaffrey numbers. And I don't think he was getting the same love that McCaffrey did. But since then, he's terrible with the Jets. He plays, I think, on the Chiefs. He may have won a Super Bowl ring. I don't remember. I think he was on the team that lost to the Bucks in that Super Bowl, but he's in that mix. He's on the Ravens. He's just kind of bouncing around. Now he's a professional boxer, I think, or at least he's like a
Is
celebrity
he
or
really?
like
Wow.
amateur boxer. Yeah, he's right now.
Wow.
He's on Twitter talking about the flat Earth theory. So, weird dude, and I think that's a pretty common theme with that Pittsburgh team. The BBB team. So credit to Mike Tomlin for keeping those guys under control and being competitive. But yeah, just a lot of wasted money on an old running back that unfortunately was just washed up at the time. So last in the AFC East, there was a few guys I think we ended up with the same pick, and maybe we should have switched it up because they spent a lot of money on guys they shouldn't have. So I'll let you go first, and I might be calling an audible on my pick here, but you go first.
Oh, yeah, for the Patriots, I went with Antonio Brown. Like, I looked at a bunch of free agent signings, and this is by far one of the worst. I think he only plays 1 game for him in 2019, and he gets like a $9 million signing bonus for that. And he just had a lot of issues off the field. I think they cut him after like 13 days. So it was just a bad fit all around. I don't know what was going on with Antonio Brown. He just really really had a bad go of it after he left the Steelers, and it starts here with the Patriots, right? Or was it the Raiders? I can't even remember. There's so many.
Yeah,
It was the Raiders first, and then the Patriots. That's how bad of an offseason it was for Antonio Brown. So
yeah.
yeah,
If you want the Antonio Brown timeline, I can give it to you. But
yeah, you
uh,
probably know it better than me.
Yeah, just real quick. He gets traded from the Steelers to the Raiders. He goes to camp, doesn't participate because of the frozen foot thing, the helmet thing, where he has a helmet that the NFL said you can't wear anymore. I think all of it was just kind of bullshit so he could get cut because he didn't want to be in Oakland or lost. I think they were still in Oakland at the time. Yeah, still in
They
Oakland.
were Oakland, yeah. They were Oakland still.
He goes to the Patriots. He gets released by the Raiders, signs with the Patriots, spends 13 days there, catches a touchdown in Miami, where he's from, gets cut because of some domestic violence issue, doesn't play again that year, but the following year signs with the Bucks and wins a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. So he got his happy ending, which is unfortunate because he's probably at the top of my sports hate list, maybe even my real hate list. I don't know.
He's just a terrible person, man, based
Yeah,
on what we
right.
saw
He
from him.
just, I
Yeah.
kind of feel bad for him because he was normal before he got smacked in the head a couple times. But anyway, I was gonna pick him. I actually wrote him down, but there was just a couple other guys that I thought of. Nelson Aguilar, they gave him a bunch of money. Hunter Henry, they gave him a bunch of money, but he's still on the team. The Aguilar contract, at least he was decent, and
Juju
it
Smith.
was only 2 year deal. But my pick was Johnny Smith. They gave him
Oh,
4 years, $50 million in 2021, and he's the backup tight end. So it was just an insane amount of money. It's like they were trying to recreate the Gronk, Aaron Hernandez thing. He ends up getting traded a couple years later for a 7th round pick, and now he's in Miami. So maybe it kind of worked out for him because he's going to be on a better offense. But yeah, just a ton of money on a backup tight end that never really made sense for the team. Uh, so moving on to the AFC West, who you got for the Chiefs?
All right. For the Chiefs, I went with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He signs a 3-year deal in 2022 for 36 million. This is after they traded away Tyreek Hill. Kind of brought in to maybe replace some of Tyreek Hill's production, but really not worth the money, not worth what they give him. He has some moments here and there, but I think mostly a pretty minimal impact for him. And so
He caught a
just
touchdown in the
after
Super
losing,
Bowl, right?
he did.
I'm
I
sorry to
think.
bring that up. I don't mean to bring that up.
Why you gotta bring?
Uh,
Why you gotta bring up the Super Bowl, bro? I
he,
don't. I don't remember anything about the Super Bowl.
I want to
That never happened.
say, yeah, it didn't happen for you. I want to say he also made like the game sealing catch against the Ravens in the championship game. So
He
I don't
had
know.
okay. He had some impact, but if you look at his regular season stats, not worth the money they're paying him. Kind of,
Yeah,
doesn't really make up for Tyreek.
huge drop against the Eagles that I remember. I think he's a free agent now. I'm not sure where maybe they released him or something. I don't think he's still on the team.
I think he's still on the team. I don't think they
Okay.
released him.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Maybe the Super Bowl catch and the Ravens
Yeah, they're like,
catch
I
gives him
guess we could
hope.
keep this guy now. Yeah.
But I doubt he'll be starting for them this year. Uh,
Yeah.
I went with another guy, Anthony Hitchens. He was a linebacker. He wasn't a complete bust. I think that the Chiefs are just, in general, they're such a great front office that they don't usually make bad free agent signings. I would have gone with Kadarius Toney, but they traded for him, and he ended up catching 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. So it kind of works out for them no matter what. Even though he cost them a few games this year, it obviously didn't matter. He ended up being a healthy scratch for the Super Bowl, and they still won the damn thing. Uh,
Wow.
but they gave Anthony Hitchens 5 years, $45 million. He wasn't a 3 down linebacker. He was nothing special. So a lot of money for a guy that they probably thought was going to be a big
Mm-hmm.
contributor, but it doesn't do much. Next, the Las Vegas Raiders. I could do a whole podcast on this, but you go
You
first.
could. Yeah, there are quite a few options to choose from. This one was like it was just like pick your poison here, Khalid. So, I went with Trent Brown. They signed him in 2019. They signed him to a 4-year, $66 million deal, making him the highest paid offensive lineman in the league at the time. I would say he had a decent 2019 season. He played 11 games. But after that, it was kind of all downhill for him. He gets injured. He has this weird thing in 2021 where he's like injured and he's like has this like weird IV thing that causes a blood clot for him. Yeah, I think that was in the 2020 season, and then he gets traded out in 2021 for a 5th round pick. So very odd tenure for him with the Raiders.
Yeah.
And they gave him a bunch of money, but apparently that's what John Gruden does. He just pays people. Is what
Yeah,
we saw.
this was money that should have went to Khalil Mack, but they decided to pay him,
That's
and
what
they
makes it
paid.
worse, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was excited for the signing. I wasn't obviously happy about the Khalil Mack trade, but I was excited about the signing itself. And I thought, okay, this is a. We already had a left tackle, so I was like, all right, this is an elite right tackle, but he shows up to Vegas. He's out of shape. He's not ready to play. If you look at pictures with him on the Patriots before this, because he was great on the Patriots, he was on that 2018 Super
Yeah.
Bowl team. He looks he's massive, but he looks in shape. And then he shows up in Vegas and he's sloppy and out of shape. And then he had that weird blood clot thing. So yeah, a lot of things went wrong for Trent Brown, but most of it was probably self inflicted and just a result of John Gruden's clown show. Um,
Yep.
there was so many guys to pick,
So
man.
many, so many. I didn't even know which one. I was like, man, can I pick like five here and like not talk
Yeah,
about
right.
other teams?
There was Lamarcus Joyner, who they
Oh,
played
that
out of
was a bad one.
position. I think he was
Yep.
a nickel corner, and they played him at safety, and
At
he was
safety.
terrible.
Yep.
Corey Littleton, they gave him a bunch of money from the Rams. He was incredible on the Rams, and he was terrible in
Trash.
Las Vegas.
Yep.
Got benched for an undrafted rookie. Uh, I was gonna pick Chandler Jones, and I actually wrote it down, but it felt mean because they gave him a bunch of money, but he had a mental health breakdown. He
Yeah.
basically had
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
psychotic episode,
Psych.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, for that one, it was bad because they knew about it. He's
Yeah.
had,
They knew about it, right?
yeah, he's had mental health issues before, and you decide, and I think that's a theme with the Gruden era was a lot of arrogance. Oh, that's my guy. I'm going to make him great. And then the McDaniels era was the same thing. Oh, he was in New England. I know him. He was great.
I'm gonna
It's
bring
just
him over.
arrogance,
Yeah.
just pure arrogance.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so not Chandler Jones because I feel bad for him because he probably should be in like a facility being taken care of kind of thing. It's not really his fault. My pick was Jimmy Garoppolo. Um, it stung that they got rid of Derek Carr after 9 years. You can see I'm wearing a Derek Carr jersey right now. My second favorite Raiders quarterback ever. And they get rid of him. And to make things worse, they sign Jimmy freaking Garoppolo to a 3-year, $72.5 million contract with 33.75 of it guaranteed. So the 72 was kind of fugazi, but it was arrogance. It's Josh McDaniels saying, Derek Carr was not good enough for me. He didn't know my offense, blah, blah. So I'm going to get this guy that's never healthy, that's never consistent, who's 30 plus years old, hasn't been healthy in years, and we're going to win with him. Obviously, that doesn't work out. He plays in a handful of games, and he's terrible, throws more interceptions than touchdowns, ends up getting benched for a fourth-round rookie who was okay. And really, the only saving grace is the fact that he tested positive for PEDs. So shout out Jimmy Garoppolo for doing that because it allowed them to cut him early, and it saved them 11 or 12 million dollars on the cap
Oh,
this
nice.
year. So
It's not bad.
good for him.
And
And now,
and and because he played so badly, they fired Josh McDaniels.
exactly. And now we have a coach that I actually like. So
There you go.
I guess all's well that ends well. Maybe I don't know,
Maybe.
but yeah, we've spent too much time on the Raiders. But yeah, we
All
could
right,
spend a lot
let's
of
move
time
it.
here if we wanted.
We
Uh,
could definitely.
Next up, the Los Angeles Chargers. So back over to you.
Yeah. So this one I had to. I think we're gonna agree here, and I don't know if you have a different pick, but J.C. Jackson signs in 2022. He signs a 5-year, 82.5 million deal after coming off a career high of 8 passes defended with the Patriots. I think he has like 8 interceptions in 2021. And then injuries, he just gets limited to 5 games. He plays only 2 games for the Chargers in 2023, and then he gets traded back to the Patriots. So, and then the Patriots released him earlier this year. So, what a ride for this guy. I think he might be one of the worst free agent signings in the history of free agent signings, given the amount of money he was given and the impact he has, and how quickly he gets released and traded out by the Chargers, and then released by the Patriots. So he was at the peak of his game, gets a big money contract, and never was quite the same guy after that.
Yeah, like you said, we agreed on this one. And he ended up, I think, at some point was being a healthy scratch for a while. He just
Mm-hmm.
one thing, I think one lesson is always beware of Patriots defenders because we've seen,
Yeah, they're much better in that system.
yeah, Trey Flowers was in there, was on our NFC list. I think Jamie Collins is another guy that got a ton of money from Detroit, ends up back in New England. JC Jackson ends up back in New England. I feel like there's probably a long list of guys that leave New England after playing well there under the greatest defensive coach in NFL history, and they get paid, and then they revert back to the mean because they're not being coached by Bill
Yep.
Belichick anymore. Uh, One notable exception so far has been Jack Jones from the Raiders. They didn't give him a
Oh
ton of
yeah.
money, but
Yep.
he looked pretty good this year. But yeah,
Yeah.
just in general, if the guy played for the Patriots and played really well for the Patriots, just kind of give it a little side eye before you give him a ton of
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. Yeah. Let him stay
Next
on the
up,
Patriots.
yeah, exactly, because they always go back. That's what I noticed. They always
They
go
always go
back.
back. At some point, they always end up back there. Yeah.
They make their money and go back. Um, Next, the Denver Broncos, which you broke the rules here a little bit, but you can explain why.
A little bit. A little bit. Yes. Okay. So I picked Russell Wilson, who they technically traded for, but then they did sign him to a 5-year, $245 million contract extension
Okay,
with the
wait,
Broncos.
stop right
So
there. Stop right there and repeat
yeah.
that number, please.
Okay.
Repeat that.
Okay. He signs a 5-year,
Yeah.
$245 million
Yes. Thank
contract
you.
extension. What did I say? Did I mess it up?
No, you said it right. I just wanted you to repeat it for emphasis
Oh, okay.
because it was
For
insane. So
emphasis.
go
Okay.
ahead.
Yep. Yeah. That is insane. Like if you just eliminate the trade part of this, right? If you just say, hey, they didn't trade 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick for Russell Wilson, and you just said, okay, they signed him to a 5-year, $245 million deal. It's still a terrible signing, right? He has one of his worst statistical years with the Broncos in 2022, slightly better 23 season, and then he gets released by the Broncos just earlier this month, and they take a bit like one of the massive most like I think it's like the biggest dead money hit in NFL history, $85 million, right? So
Insane.
yikes, like
That's an insane amount of money.
insane. Like I don't know what the Broncos were thinking when they traded for him and then give him this extension. It's just bad all around, right? I know it's technically a trade, but even eliminating the trade part of this, it was just yikes.
Yeah, I think what happened was they traded for him. They signed him to that big extension. I don't know why they did that,
Yep.
but then they sold the team. So it's
Yeah.
not the same ownership group. I think that's the difference. That's the only it's not even like a saving grace, but it just makes it more understandable, right? It was a different ownership group that decided to give him all that money. It was a different coach. So this regime basically comes in and is just like, we need to cut bait on this guy. We need a clean slate. So who cares how much dead money there is? I mean, it's insane that they have to do it, but I agree. Is it awful signing? Definitely makes sense here, even though you twisted the rules a little bit. But it's not their fault. You know what I'm saying? It's not the current Broncos ownership fault. So that's the only like saving grace. You know what I mean? It's not like they chose
Sure.
the same guy made that both decisions. Uh,
Yeah.
so I went with an offensive lineman, Juwan James. This was back in 2019. He signs a 4-year, $52 million deal. He plays just 3 games in 2 seasons. He tore his Achilles in a workout that didn't happen at the team facility. So I don't know how much of that money he got. I think we talked last week about, I think it was the center for the Seahawks that was going to work out
Yeah.
during COVID, but
Yep.
decided not to because he didn't want to get hurt and lose
Yep.
his guaranteed
Exactly.
money.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
so yeah, just be careful where you're working out. But yeah, it's obviously not as egregious as Russell Wilson, but it's up there. So we'll
Absolutely.
move over to the AFC North, and we'll go with the Baltimore Ravens. Who you got here?
So this one was, I would say it was kind of slim pickings on Baltimore. They don't sign a lot of players to big money deals. And so I went with Earl Thomas. I think probably the same. You might have the same pick here. He signs a 4-year, $55 million contract in 2019. He just plays one season with the Ravens. Doesn't look quite the same guy. I know he was coming off an injury as well. Just doesn't look quite the same, right? He doesn't look like the Legion of Boom Earl Thomas that we see. Gets into, I think, a fight there on the Ravens and punches his own teammate. So just just a few issues there, and he just not the same level of production that he had when he was with the Seahawks. So I thought this was a pretty bad signing given the amount of money they gave him and the fact
Hmm.
that the Ravens don't normally give out big money to free agents here.
Yeah, they don't. They usually, draft well. They sign their own guys. They'll make a trade like the Roquan Smith trade. They sign guys for cheap deals and get a ton of value from them. Um, I remember seeing this deal and being really excited about it. I thought he was going to be perfect in Baltimore. I think the what ended up happening was he just was kind of washed at that point. He's coming off a broken leg. And I think his most memorable moment was getting stiff armed by Derrick Henry in that playoff game. They keep showing that replay now that Derrick Henry's on the Ravens. But do you remember the Snapchat thing that happened with him and his wife pulling a gun on him at some point?
Did that really happen? His
Yeah.
wife pulled a gun on him? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'll give like the
I didn't.
PG version.
Yes. Yeah,
You
yeah.
remember
Okay.
this? Okay.
It's coming back to me now. It's coming back to me. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That
So
happened.
I
Yes.
believe the story was him and his brother were sleeping with the same woman at the same time, and his wife showed up and pulled a gun on him, and it was a whole thing, and that was part of the drama. One of the reasons that he got released. So it was not just
Wow.
on the field drama; it was off the field as well. Uh, Speaking of
I
off the
don't get
field
it, man.
drama,
You have all that money and you do all that kind of off the field stuff. Whatever.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Let's
speechless
move
about
on.
that.
Yeah. Let's move on.
Yeah. Speaking of off the field drama, the Cleveland Browns. Again, you broke the rules, but it's okay. Who you got?
I didn't break the rules. I just twisted them to suit my needs. Um, I mainly I did this because so we could differ a little bit in our picks. So I went with Deshaun Watson again. Signs he gets traded there in 2022. Signs a 5-year, 230 million, fully guaranteed contract. Never happened in the history of the NFL. I think in terms of that large amount. I think Kirk Cousins came close, but he didn't get 100% guarantee.
He
So he's
got
the only player with
100%
100.
guaranteed, but
Did
it
he?
wasn't a 5-year deal for 200 million. I mean, are you talking about
Oh,
now
it
or are you
was a
talking about
three.
with the
It was like it
Vikings?
was with the Vikings. With the Vikings.
Yeah, I think it was 2 or 3 years, and he was kept betting on himself. He definitely didn't get 5 years.
Got it. Okay, so this was the largest fully guaranteed deal in NFL history.
Hmm.
So yeah, so he gets 230 million fully guaranteed, and this is after they trade for him. They trade, I think, 3 first-round picks, um, and they knew he was going to be suspended some amount of games, right, because of his off-field stuff.
Hmm.
And so he only played 6 games in 2022 due to an 11-game suspension, and he's okay. He's whatever. 2023, this last season, he's just he's kind of injury prone. He only plays like I think six and a half games because he like played a half a game and was like, no, my shoulder's hurting. I can't finish this game. And he didn't look great. He didn't look great. So I don't know if it's just the injuries or what it is, but he does not look like the Deshaun Watson we saw on the Houston Texans. And if he doesn't have another great season, like, I mean, I don't know if the Browns have an option to cut him because they might take an even bigger dead money hit than the Broncos did. So I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see
that's the
what happens with
downside.
Deshaun Watson. That's the downside, right? Because you give him a fully
Yeah.
guaranteed, so you're gonna take a big dead money hit. So it's
And
looking like a pretty bad signing here.
it's already awful. I mean, unless he redeems
Yeah,
himself. But I remember
somehow.
it was
But
just so weird. Early in the season, it was like he came back and then he was out, and then I remember he was on track to play all week long. I forget who the opponent was. And then
I
that
think the
morning,
Niners. It was the Niners.
was it? Yeah, there you go. And then yeah, that morning he's just like, "Oh, actually I can't play. So you got to play
Yeah,
this rookie." Um
yeah,
and
exactly.
it shows you that, I mean, the Browns end up making the playoffs with Joe Flacco and like his rotating cast of quarterbacks, and shows you like if Deshaun Watson was still the Deshaun Watson that we knew in Houston, like they would be a Super Bowl favorite, not even a Super Bowl contender, like
Absolutely.
with that defense
Yeah,
and everything. So just
yeah.
a ton of money wasted on a pretty shitty person. So I'm I'm kind of glad he's struggling. I'm not ashamed to say that, and I hope he continues to struggle. Um, Next, or not next, sorry, my pick, Austin Hooper. Not quite as exciting or dramatic as Deshaun Watson. He signs a 4-year deal with $23 million guaranteed. He basically he doesn't reproduce the production level that he had in Atlanta. He's okay, and then they end up releasing him last offseason for a dead cap of $11 million, which is a lot of money for a tight end, especially like a backup tight end. But they have Njoku, so they're okay. I want to say in a few years they might be regretting that Jerry Jeudy contract. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a ton of money.
That was a ton of money. Yeah, they're gonna regret that for sure. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next up is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who usually don't give a lot of money to free agents. So this will be interesting. Who you got here for the Steelers?
Yeah, it was tough. I didn't want to pick the same guy as you on this one, so I was like, let me just vary it up a little bit. So I went with Mitchell Trubisky. Uh, they bring him in to be the starter, right? I think this is what it seems like. In 2022, they give him like a 2-year deal. He gets paid like I think 14 mil a year, something like that. Um, or is it? Yeah, something like that. He gets paid, and they could have traded for Jimmy G at that time. They didn't do that. They draft Kenny Pickett, and he was he was a pretty bad starting quarterback. I don't think I think he gets benched for Kenny Pickett like 6 games into that season. Then Kenny Pickett gets hurt. He plays again, and then like even this last year, he kind of plays 1 or 2 games, and like, no, this guy's not the answer. They bring in Mason Rudolph, and so they probably should have maybe treated him like a backup quarterback and not seen him as someone who could be like this veteran bridge to a rookie guy in Kenny Pickett. But I don't know. Somehow the Steelers, even with Mitchell Trubisky starting, ended up making the playoffs. So nothing can really deter them. They can have Mitchell Trubisky starting, and they can still make the playoffs.
Yeah, I remember last season watching them with Mitch and then with Mason Rudolph, and it just had me thinking like, what is this guy doing in practice that makes you think that he's better than Mason Rudolph? Because
Yeah,
he was awful, like
he's
incredibly,
awful.
incredibly bad. They lose that game to the Patriots at home just because of him, blowing in a fourth down play. And then Mason Rudolph comes in and lights it up. I forget who they played. Maybe it was Cincinnati, but he lights them up, and Rudolph looks decent. And I think now he's in
Yep.
Tennessee, but yeah, he looks like a decent quarterback. Well, Mitch has just been awful for a few years now. So I mean, I don't think they gave him a ton of money, but it made sense at the time. Like, all right, we're gonna
Yeah.
try to get a quarterback in the late first round. Doesn't work out with Pickett, but whatever it is, he's just I don't understand it. I think pedigree and like draft position makes people like fools people into thinking that he's still good, and that's why Sam Darnold just got some money from the Vikings. That's why Mitchell Trubisky keeps bouncing around. So yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
um, my guy Eric Ebron. So as we said, the Steelers don't usually give out a lot of money. Um, he only signed for 2 years, $12 million. This was back in 2020. He just wasn't that good. Couldn't He had a lot of drop issues. He wasn't a good blocker. Just not a very good complement to Pratt Fryermuth, who ends up getting he's a second round pick and he just outplays Ebron. So not a huge waste of money, but just again, because you're the Steelers, you don't give a ton of money out anyway to free agents. Usually they're making trades or signing guys or drafting well. So just very bizarre. So last in the division, the Cincinnati Bengals. Who you got here?
I went with Preston Brown. They signed him in they signed him in 2018, and then they extended him in 2019. He signs a 3-year, $16.5 million contract with the Bengals. By November of that same contract, the Bengals cut him, and he's off the roster. I think he had like a knee injury that he was dealing with, so he never looks quite the same. But it was enough for the Bengals to cut him midseason. So he barely performs. He barely plays that contract. He plays like 7 games on that contract, and they cut him.
Yeah, that's a common theme here. I went with Trey Waynes. So he was pretty good in Minnesota. He ends up signing with the Bengals in 2020. Doesn't play that entire season because of a torn pec. And then he comes back the next year. He has a hamstring issue and is limited to just 5 games. So basically, just injuries completely shot this guy's career. It's unfortunate, but we're not making excuses here. So that's the guy we picked,
Exactly.
or I picked for the Bengals.
Yeah.
And now the last division, the
Tags. Yeah.
AFC South, the Houston
Yep.
Texans. Who you got here?
Houston Texans. I got Tayshaun Gibson actually. So he signs in 2019. He signs a 3-year, $22.5 million contract with the Texans. He has an okay 2019 season. He gets put on IR in December with the back injury. He finished that season with 51 tackles, 3 pass deflections, 3 interceptions. And then by the 2020 offseason, he's gone. So he really only has, I think, a year in Houston. And I mean, I thought he played decent enough for them to keep him around, but they just cut him. For whatever reason, I don't know if there was some sort of out in his contract that they could take advantage of, but it seemed like they gave him big money, and then he doesn't really get to play through that contract. And I think a lot of it might have been injury related for him.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. For me, I went with Randall Cobb. So they gave him 3 years, $27 million in 2020. So he had a pretty good season with the Cowboys the year before. I think that was the year Dak threw for like 5,000 yards. So maybe his numbers were just a little inflated.
Yep.
But for some reason, the success doesn't translate in Houston. He catches 38 passes for a little over 400 yards, which is not something that you give a guy $9 million for. You can kind of get that production off the street. And he ends up getting traded back to the Packers for a 6th-round pick. So not a huge waste of money, but I think he's a guy that they probably thought would elevate their offense, operating out of the slot, and then it just doesn't work out that way. Uh,
Yep.
Next, the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think we both have the same guy here.
Yeah, I mean, it was so hard to go against this pick, Khalid. Like I researched and I researched, and I was like, man, there's some bad signings here, but nothing as egregious as signing Nick Foles. Um, they signed him to a 4-year, $91 million deal that includes 50 million guaranteed. He he just, I mean, I know he won that Super Bowl with the Eagles, but he just never lives up to that kind of hype that he gets coming off that Super Bowl win. I think he has some injuries. He loses his job to Gardner Minshew at some point, and I think I mean, what does he play? Only like 4 or 5 games for the Jaguars, so it's a pretty bad tenure for Nick Foles there, and really people realize, hey, I guess Nick Foles is really a backup, not a starter, and maybe they'll stop paying starter money.
This guy has had one of the most interesting, unique NFL careers. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make sense on any level, right? I
Does
think
not.
he's a 2nd-round pick by the Eagles under Chip Kelly. He plays pretty well. He plays, decent as a young quarterback. I remember I seen him live throw 7 touchdowns against my Raiders in Oakland, which I think is still an NFL record. That was a tough game to watch. But then he gets traded to St. Louis. I think he's part of the Sam Bradford deal. He gets benched in St. Louis. He compliments retirement. He goes to KC. He kind of falls in love with football again with Andy Reid in that offense, and then he follows Doug Peterson back to Philly as the backup. And somehow, some way, he just like catches fire. I don't know what happens. He just goes crazy during those. Not even during those playoffs. I want to say because he wasn't that great in the first couple games, but in the Super Bowl, he was insane. He just looked like
Yep.
he outdueled Tom Brady, which is
Yep.
just insane.
It was crazy.
And then he gets that big money deal from Jacksonville. I think you said it was $50 million guaranteed. It was a franchise record at the time. And maybe if he doesn't get hurt, it's a different story. But he just
Maybe.
once that collarbone went, it was done. I think after that, he just bounced around here and there and just kept getting lit up.
Yep.
Hopefully, he's retired somewhere now. But thanks for the memories, Nick. I was living in Philly at the time, and it was awesome seeing that happen and being there for a city winning the Super Bowl. I didn't go to the parade, but I got to see some of the aftermath of the celebrations, and it was awesome.
Yep.
Next, the Indianapolis Colts. Who you got here?
Yeah, this is another tough one because I don't think the Colts signed too many guys to big money deals either, so it was a little tough one. I went with Pierre Desir. He signs a 3-year, 22.5 million contract, and the Colts are kind of bringing him in to be a starter, and he just never gets back to what they saw from him in 2018. He's plagued by hamstring injuries that cost him 4 games. He's just struggling all season. The Colts secondary, doesn't play well down the stretch. He's unable to fill that hole left by Kenny Moore, and they just say, hey, I guess this guy was a mistake, and they release him a year into his contract. You know, they he just didn't give them the production, and they just
Mm-hmm.
take that out. And this is one of the poorer contracts that Chris Ballard gives out, but maybe there's another one, but like they really don't give out big money to free agents. So it was hard to pick here.
Yeah, it was definitely hard to pick. They recently gave a lot of money to Jonathan Taylor and Michael
Yep.
Pittman.
Mm-hmm.
But they're both good players. Maybe the Taylor one, if he falls off, could be a contender in a couple years. But
Yep.
you know, at least it's like it's proven. And he was good last year when he was healthy. He was just in and out of the lineups.
Yep.
I went with again. It's hard to pick because there wasn't that many. I went with Devin Funchess, who was
Yep.
pretty good in Carolina. In 2019, he signs a 1 year, $10 million deal. So not a ton of money, but he plays just one game before suffering a season-ending shoulder injury, and he hasn't played in the NFL since. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
just a again, there's not a lot to pick from. It's kind of
No,
like, all
there
right,
was not. Yeah.
it's that or Pierre Desir. That's about it. Maybe
Yeah.
again, Jonathan
That's it.
Taylor or Michael Pittman. But
Yeah.
they're usually a pretty disciplined team. Uh, maybe Philip Rivers, but I think they only signed him for a year anyway. Matt Ryan, I think
And
they
he
also.
was, and he led him to the playoffs. He led him to the playoffs.
You're
Matt
right.
Ryan was cheap. Yeah. I mean, Nick Foles. Did they sign Nick Foles at some point too?
Yeah, but he was like a third string quarterback.
Yeah.
Maybe Stephon
Yeah. Yeah.
Gilmore, but maybe they traded
They
for
didn't pay him
him.
big money. Yeah, I think they traded for him, and they didn't pay him big money either. They didn't sign him to an
And he was
extension.
good. He was good before they traded him to Dallas. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. The
Cool.
last team on the list here, the Tennessee Titans. You got a recent one, which is always
I
fun.
did. Yeah, I went with Andre Dillard. They signed him in 2023, like just last year. Signed him to a 3-year, $29 million contract. He's named the starting left tackle, and he starts 10 of 16 games that he played in, and he just wasn't good. He was just terrible. They released him. They just released him like 6 days ago,
Yeah,
and he gave
recently.
up 12 sacks and 42 QB pressures. Just was not the starting left tackle that they thought he might be. And, I'm not sure why they thought that, because he looked like he was on the decline with the Eagles. And I mean, he's a young guy. Maybe they thought he had some upside left on it. But yeah, it was just not a good signing, and he's a free agent again.
I was gonna say I thought he did well with Philly, but maybe the rest of that offensive line was so good that he just was able to look pretty decent on that group. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. But
Yep.
yeah, maybe that's another lesson because I remember we talked last time was the Lions signed Vaitai from the Eagles,
Yep.
and
Yep.
he hasn't been very good either. So maybe another valuable lesson: don't sign defensive players from New England, and don't sign offensive linemen from Philadelphia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I went with Vic Beasley here. There's a couple other guys. I think like Bud Dupree was a name that I
Mm-hmm.
considered.
Yep.
Some other guys. I think they signed Jadeveon Clowney at some point too, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
They
But
did. Yeah, they did. Yep.
they keep trying to like sign these older, not even older, but just pass rushers on these 1 year deals, and it's not doesn't work out for them.
Yeah.
Specifically for Vic Beasley, 1 year, 9.5 million, not a ton of money, but he doesn't show up to camp on time. He shows up to camp and then he's put on basically the pup list, active non-football injury list, I guess is maybe the pup list. But he gets activated a week before the season opener, and then he gets released in November after recording 3 tackles. So they paid $9.5 million for 3 tackles and 5 games. And then he ends up playing in the XFL. I think I want to say he signed for the Raiders later that year as like a waiver wire pickup or something. Doesn't do anything, and just ends up being washed. He was pretty good in Atlanta when he first got
He
drafted.
was
So
he was he was really good in Atlanta when he first got drafted. So the
yeah,
fact that he fell so far off was shocking to see, but I guess you never know.
there you go. And now he's in the XFL or UFL, whatever you want to call it, which is happening soon, which is fun. So that's it. What lessons have you taken from this one? I think last week it was injuries. What else? Don't sign guys coming off like fluke years. What else
Yeah,
were the other
yeah.
ones? Yeah. Any other lessons?
I I mean, this one is don't sign Patriot players to big money contracts. Just don't do it. Especially if the Patriots are letting him walk away, right? Unless his name is Tom Brady, don't sign him. And
Yeah,
maybe
not
don't
even just
sign
Patriots
offensive.
defenders. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and don't sign linemen from the Philadelphia Eagles. And I
Yeah.
think that's and yeah, I mean, I think you see guys have one decent year. Don't do that. Don't pay a ton of guaranteed money to old quarterbacks who may not perform, or guys who have been played in a couple years, right? Don't trade don't trade away first round draft picks for guys like that, right? I think
Yeah.
it's maybe easier to develop your own guys and then Like I think you're better off trying to develop a rookie that you
Hmm.
draft versus going out and paying someone like Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson and giving up tons of draft picks, tons of money. Um, comes to kind of hurt your franchise later on.
Yeah, I remember there was one thing I wanted to mention during the Browns thing we talked about Deshaun Watson. I remember the deal itself was just such an outlier in the fact that they gave him so much guaranteed money. It kind of flipped things
Mm-hmm.
flipped things upside down in the NFL. Really pissed off a lot of teams because they were just like,
Oh yeah,
"You guys are so desperate for a quarterback. You just did the dumbest thing imaginable, giving this
yeah,
dude who we haven't seen play in a year because he missed that whole
yep,
season with the Texans, and you just gave him $230 million. And now we have to do the same with our quarterback. Remember, it caused a lot of issues
right,
with Lamar
yep,
Jackson
yeah,
because he
oof,
was like,
yeah.
if
He's
the
like, I should get that
Browns,
guarantee. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. I mean, he ends up getting pretty close to that, but at least he deserves it, and he's not,
yep,
doing
shady
assaulting
things.
people off the field, you know. So yeah, I guess that's a lesson. Don't sign rapists. Don't sign Philadelphia Eagles offensive linemen. Don't sign New England Patriots players. Period. And you should be all right.
Yep,
But yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate you guys. Make sure to check us out on all the major social media platforms at 4040 Vision Pod. And make sure to check us out and hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thanks.
peace.